Your exhaustion isn't a flaw. It's a signal, a quiet scream no one taught you how to hear. From the moment you could walk, you were handed a script. Push through. Don't complain. Rest is for the weak. Keep performing. And when the pressure became too much, when your chest tightened for no reason, when your thoughts got too loud or too quiet, you didn't ask for help. You asked yourself what's wrong with you, because that's how this system works. It burns you down and then blames you for the ashes. Mental health has been branded as a luxury, something for people with money, with time, with soft lives. But what if that's a lie? What if your mind has been fighting for air in a world that never let it breathe? Let me ask you something. Have you ever cried in the bathroom at work, then walked out like nothing happened? Have you ever laughed in a meeting, while a part of you was silently breaking? Have you ever been so emotionally numb that even sleep felt like work? You're not broken. You're living in a society that profits off your burnout, shames your silence, and convinces you that therapy is indulgence instead of survival. But mental health isn't a treat. It's not a reward you earn after overworking yourself into dust. It's a right, and you were taught to ignore it. In this video, we're going to dismantle the lie. We'll expose the silent epidemic of emotional exhaustion hidden behind "I'm fine." We'll talk about working while depressed, the stigma around asking for help, the systems that benefit from your silence, and what it really means to reclaim your mental well-being. This isn't about motivation. This is about liberation. Because millions are surviving instead of living. And it's time someone said it. You deserve to heal, even if the world never gave you permission. Christina Maslach, the Berkeley psychologist who pioneered burnout research, describes the syndrome as a mismatch between human beings and the environments that demand more than they ever return. When the architect of the field says your exhaustion is structural, not personal, it changes everything. Picture Marcus, 29. Stocking shelves at a big box store on the night shift. Corporate posters preach self-care matters, yet schedules flip every week, keeping him permanently jet-lagged. By Wednesday, his eyes burn and his brain swims in static, but overtime is mandatory. Maslach would call this the exhaustion phase. Marcus just calls it survival. Or take Elena, 41, an elementary teacher celebrated during Mental Health Awareness Week. The same district cut her counseling benefits to balance the budget. Every Friday, she buys classroom supplies with her own credit card and grades until midnight. That creeping numbness she feels marking math quizzes, Maslach labels it cynicism, the mind's shield when ideals collide with an indifferent system. Finally, meet Devin, 34, a software engineer praised for grit. Deadlines stack, meetings multiply, and the app must launch before the quarter ends. He forgets the last line he wrote moments after typing it. His sense of competence evaporates. Maslach calls this reduced efficacy, the last pillar of burnout. Devin thinks he's simply slipping. 3 different lives, one common pattern. A workplace engineered for output, not well-being. The U.S. Surgeon General's 2022 advisory echoes Maslach, warning that toxic job conditions now rival secondhand smoke as a health hazard. Yet popular culture still whispers, work harder, everything else is weakness. Here's the truth. If your phone battery died after 12 hours, you wouldn't scold the battery. You'd question the demands. But when your mind dims under relentless load, you call yourself defective. That's the ideological sleight of hand of modern capitalism, turning systemic overload into a private shame. Recognizing burnout as environmental misuse, not individual failure, is the first step toward reclaiming mental health as a right. It shifts the question from what's wrong with me to who profits when I stay silent. That pivot cracks open possibility, collective bargaining for humane schedules, insisting insurance covers therapy, daring to say, I'm exhausted, without apology. Because as Dr. Maslach reminds us, people don't burn out because they're weak. They burn out because they've been strong for too long in conditions that refuse to change. So let's name the mismatch. 12-hour shifts sold as opportunity, emails after midnight called commitment, health plans that list therapy as an out-of-network luxury. When reality and rhetoric diverge that sharply, burnout is not a possibility. It's a guarantee. No mindfulness app can cancel a broken schedule. No mantra can erase a negative margin. And no human being deserves to live like that. If someone told you that going to the doctor for a broken bone was a luxury, you'd laugh, then probably report them. But say the same about therapy, and suddenly it sounds normal. How did we get here? Mental health has long been pushed to the margins, especially in the US, where profit and perception often dictate who gets to heal and who doesn't. And while campaigns scream, "It's okay to not be okay," the cost of therapy in most cities tells a different story. It's okay, but only if you can afford $150 per session. Only if your insurance doesn't list mental health as out of network. Only if your workplace doesn't see it as weakness. According to the American Psychological Association, nearly 40% of Americans say they've needed therapy, but couldn't afford it. That's tens of millions living in quiet distress, taught to carry what they were never meant to hold alone. Take Jenna, a 38-year-old single mom in Milwaukee. She's raising 2 kids, working full-time, and recently lost her father. She cries in traffic but keeps it together at work. She once Googled therapists in her area, closed the tab after seeing the prices. She tells herself she's being dramatic, that she'll get over it. Or Sean, 27, a former college athlete now stuck in a sales job that pays well but drains him. He grew up hearing that real men suck it up. He walks around with panic attacks disguised as back pain, shame disguised as silence. Therapy isn't even on his radar. Not because he doesn't need it, but because somewhere along the line, he learned that needing it makes him weak. But here's the truth. Therapy isn't a spa day. It's not a trend, not an indulgence. It's a medically recognized form of treatment, backed by neuroscience, psychology, and decades of clinical evidence. If you had chronic pain, you'd be told to see a doctor. If you can't sleep, can't think straight, can't feel joy, why should that be different? Mental health isn't secondary, it's foundational. And the lie that it's a luxury? That lie keeps millions suffering in silence. You deserve access to healing, not when you've earned it, not when you've broken down completely, but now, simply because you're human. There's a dangerous illusion in our culture. If you're productive, you must be okay. But what happens when you're not? What happens when you meet every deadline, smile at every meeting, answer every text, but inside, it's all slipping? This is the reality of high-functioning mental collapse, and millions are living it without a name. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, author of The Body Keeps the Score, explains that trauma and chronic emotional stress don't always scream. Sometimes they whisper through forgetfulness, irritability, muscle tension, or quiet despair. You keep moving because you have to, because no one told you survival mode was a symptom. Let's talk about Jake. He's 36, works in finance, and just got promoted. From the outside, he's thriving. Suit pressed, inbox zero, gym at 6 a.m., but he hasn't felt joy in 6 months. Every morning, he stares at the ceiling, bargaining with his alarm. He scrolls LinkedIn to look motivated, then dissociates in the shower. No one knows. He's too on top of it. Then there's Priya, 31, a nurse practitioner in Dallas. She's calm during emergencies, beloved by patients, but she hasn't had a full meal in 3 days. Her hands shake when she types. The anxiety makes her skin crawl, but she doesn't call it that. She calls it being just tired. Her burnout wears a smile. This kind of suffering doesn't show up in hospital scans, but it's lethal in slow motion. It tells you that because you're functioning, you must be fine. So you delay therapy. You downplay symptoms. You gaslight yourself into silence. We need to say this clearly. Just because you're not collapsing doesn't mean you're not in crisis. According to the CDC, over 50% of Americans with mental health conditions receive no treatment. Many are high achievers, parents, caregivers, people who seem strong. But emotional strength doesn't mean invulnerability. Sometimes the most put-together person is the one closest to unraveling. High-functioning collapse is real, and it thrives in the cracks between perception and reality, where praise hides panic, where productivity covers pain, where silence becomes survival. But you weren't meant to live this way. You don't have to keep pretending. Your pain is valid, even if no one sees it, even if you still get shit done. British cultural theorist Mark Fisher once wrote, "It's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. But if you've ever found yourself too tired to think, too drained to care, too busy to breathe, you've felt what he meant. This system isn't failing. It's working exactly as designed, and it runs on your exhaustion. Burnout isn't a glitch in the matrix. It's the fuel. Every sleepless night you normalize, every vacation you postpone, every therapy session you can't afford, Every "I'm fine" you force through clenched teeth. These aren't just personal struggles, they're profitable outcomes. The more you push past your limits, the more you produce. The more you stay silent, the more the machine hums along. And the more you question your own worth, the easier it is to sell you fixes, supplements, productivity hacks, self-help books that never mention rest. Let's talk about Lisa, a 44-year-old single woman juggling 2 jobs in LA. She works retail during the day and Instacart deliveries at night. She hasn't seen a doctor in over a year, not because she's irresponsible, but because she can't miss a shift. She's not lazy, she's trapped. Capitalism calls her resilient, but it's eating her alive. Or Brandon, 26, who freelances in tech. No benefits, no boundaries, no weekends. He's made to feel lucky to have freedom, but it's a freedom soaked in cortisol and alert fatigue. He checks Slack at midnight, afraid that any moment of stillness will cost him a contract. This system doesn't just ignore your mental health, it commodifies it. It turns wellness into a market. It labels your exhaustion as a personal branding flaw. Grind harder, don't be soft. But if your health must be sacrificed for success, is that success or is that servitude? Capitalism isn't inherently evil, but when it requires mental breakdown to maintain profit margins, it becomes something else, a machine that feeds on silence. And here's the quiet revolution. Rest is resistance. Saying no, taking space, demanding care. These aren't weaknesses. They're acts of rebellion in a system that wants you overworked and under questioning. You are not a resource. You are not a productivity metric. You are not failing. You're surviving a structure that benefits from your depletion. And once you see that, you can begin to take it back. Somewhere along the way, rest became a moral issue. Something you had to earn. Something that made you feel guilty. Not because rest is bad, but because you were taught it meant weakness. We glorify exhaustion. Congratulate the sleep-deprived. Worship the hustlers who grind through burnout like it's a badge of honor. But here's the truth. Rest isn't laziness. Rest is repair. Dr. Andrew Huberman, neuroscientist at Stanford, explains that the brain operates in ultradian cycles, waves of peak performance followed by natural dips. When we ignore those dips, when we power through without pause, the nervous system shifts into chronic stress. You're not just tired, your brain begins operating in survival mode. In survival mode, your emotional regulation falters. You misread signals, you lash out, or shut down. Sleep becomes shallow, focus fragments, joy evaporates. This isn't a flaw, it's your body begging to reset. Let's look at Maya, 34, a project manager in Atlanta. She hasn't taken a weekend off in 3 months. Each morning she powers through spreadsheets, team check-ins, and daycare drop-offs. At night, she opens her laptop just to get ahead and closes it long after her kids are asleep. She's not proud, she's numb, and still, she feels guilty when she dreams of rest. Or Carlos, 45, a warehouse supervisor in Ohio. He hasn't used a single PTO day this year, not because he's irreplaceable, but because he's afraid. Afraid that if he slows down, people will see he's struggling. That guilt he carries, it's inherited. His father never stopped working. His grandfather died on the job. This is generational exhaustion, and it's killing us slowly. Huberman notes that chronic lack of rest rewires your brain. You lose access to executive function, planning, empathy, long-term thinking. You become reactive, anxious, and emotionally brittle. Your brain can no longer distinguish a looming deadline from a life or death threat, and yet we punish ourselves for needing recovery. Because the system told us we're machines. Because we confused collapsing with commitment. But here's what they won't tell you. Rest is not optional. It's not indulgent. It's essential. You don't have to break to be allowed to breathe. You don't need a crisis to justify slowing down. You're not behind if you pause. You're healing. When you rest, your nervous system recalibrates. Your immune system strengthens. Your mind returns to clarity. And your worth? It was never based on your productivity. You are not a machine. You are allowed to stop. And the world doesn't get to define when. There's a certain kind of loneliness that no one talks about. The kind that hides behind competence. Behind the smile, the responsibility, the "you're so strong" comments. It's the loneliness of being the one who holds it all together. Dr. Gabor Maté, renowned physician and trauma expert, says it plainly. The child who is most praised for being responsible is often the one who learned to suppress their needs first. That child grows up to be the adult everyone leans on, but no one checks in on. Let's talk about Danielle, 39, a social worker in Chicago. She's the first to show up for others. She sends the check-in texts. She organizes the birthday gifts. But when she's overwhelmed, she goes silent. Not because no one cares, but because no one notices. She's strong. She always bounces back. Until she doesn't. Or Eric, 33, who's been the stable one in his friend group since college. Career sorted, mortgage paid, always available with advice. But lately, he's been waking up at 4 a.m., heart pounding, can't eat, can't focus. He told himself he was just tired. Then his body told a different story: chest pain, panic, collapse. Even in the ER, he tried to comfort others. This is the high cost of being the Rock. You become so good at surviving that no one suspects you're drowning. Maté explains that emotional suppression often masquerades as strength. We internalize that needing help is weakness. That breaking down makes us a burden. So we smile, we grind, we postpone the breakdown until it happens in silence, behind closed doors, in parked cars, in sleepless nights no one sees. And when we do ask for help, it feels like betrayal, like letting others down. But here's the truth. You're not strong because you never break. You're strong because you've carried so much, for so long, with no relief. You deserve to be more than the stable one. You deserve to be held too. To say, I'm not okay without shame. To fall apart without fearing abandonment. Because real strength is not self-erasure. It's honesty. It's softness. It's reclaiming the right to need. So if no one told you lately, you don't have to carry it alone. You never should have had to. And saying, I can't do this today is not failure. It's finally telling the truth. There are things you never learned how to say. Because the world taught you early that silence was safer. You were told to be strong, to not make it worse, to get over it. So instead of screaming, you swallowed. Instead of crying, you dissociated. And what was once a momentary defense became your default. Dr. Aswara, Thema Bryant, trauma psychologist and president of the American Psychological Association, calls this adaptive silence. She explains, what protects you in chaos can imprison you in peace. In other words, what kept you safe back then might now be what's keeping you stuck. Let's talk about Andre, 30, raised in a home where emotions were dismissed as drama. By 12, he learned how to read a room before he spoke. By 16, he learned that keeping his voice low made him less of a target. Now he's an adult who listens to everyone, but shares nothing. He nods, smiles, changes the subject. He says he's fine, but in parking lots and late-night showers, the truth leaks out, through shaking hands, racing thoughts, and sudden tears he doesn't understand. Or Sophia, 42, who left her home country for a better life. She juggles 2 jobs, raises 3 kids, sends money back home. She doesn't talk about her anxiety. She calls it exhaustion. She hasn't cried in years. Not because she isn't hurting, but because silence has become a kind of armor. Here's the danger. When you survive too long in silence, pain becomes your mother tongue. You forget what honesty feels like. You confuse numbness for strength. You start to believe that if you don't say it, it won't hurt. But your body remembers. The tension in your jaw, the fatigue that sleep can't fix, the tear that rises randomly in a grocery aisle. That's not weakness. That's the truth trying to surface. Dr. Bryant warns that when trauma is unspeakable, it doesn't vanish. It embeds. In your patterns, in your relationships, in your self-worth. The silence becomes internalized. And the more it stays inside, the more it eats you alive. But healing begins the moment you say, enough. When you allow your voice to tremble. When you tell the story you've edited for years. When you risk being seen, fully. It's terrifying. It's unfamiliar. But it's the beginning of something real. Because survival is not the same as living. And silence is not the same as peace. You were never meant to carry it alone. And you were never meant to call that weight your home. You were never meant to carry it all. Not the unspoken grief. Not the sleepless nights. Not the panic dressed as perfection. Not the silence. But somewhere along the way, you were convinced otherwise. Maybe it happened the first time you cried and someone said, "You're too sensitive." Maybe it happened when life collapsed and everyone still expected you to show up. Or maybe it happened so gradually you didn't even notice. You just woke up one day and couldn't remember the last time someone asked how you were, and meant it. Dr. Vivek Murthy, U.S. Surgeon General, calls loneliness an epidemic, not just emotional, but biological. He explains that chronic disconnection can impact your health as severely as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Let that settle for a moment. Not being seen is as dangerous as poison, and yet we wear isolation like armor. We post the highlights. We filter the pain. We convince ourselves that everyone else is coping just fine, so we shrink. We cope alone. We suffer, quietly. But the truth is, you were never designed to be self-sufficient in grief. Human beings are relational creatures. Your brain is wired for connection. Your nervous system regulates through safety and closeness. Healing doesn't happen in solitude. It happens in co-regulation, in shared breath, in mirrored emotions, in knowing someone else has been there. Let's talk about Jordan, 35. He's always been the helper. Friends lean on him. Colleagues admire him. But at night, he sits in his kitchen with the lights off, scrolling old photos, wondering when he stopped feeling real. He's surrounded by people, yet entirely alone. He doesn't know how to ask for help, because he was taught he shouldn't need it. Or Malia, 28, who posts smiling photos from yoga retreats but hasn't spoken to her mother in 6 years. She's learning how to breathe again, but some nights she curls up on the floor and cries into her hoodie. The world thinks she's thriving, but inside, she's afraid she's unlovable. That if people saw the truth, they'd leave. So many of us feel this ache, this exhaustion, this slow grief for the connection we never had, or lost along the way. But here's what no one told you. You are not broken for needing others. You are not behind for slowing down. You are not weak for admitting you're struggling. That first conversation, the one where you say, "I don't think I can do this by myself anymore," that might be the bravest thing you'll ever say. And yes, it might not be met with perfect understanding. Not everyone will know how to hold you. But the ones who do, they become your lifeline, because healing doesn't demand crowds. It starts with one person who listens without trying to fix you. One moment where you let your mask slip. One shared silence that feels safer than any advice. And maybe that person isn't in your life yet. Maybe that space doesn't exist around you. Then this video becomes that voice. You are not alone. You never were. You were just unheard. This world makes it hard to be human. It rewards disconnection. It monetizes your pain. It teaches you to cope in isolation and calls that resilience. But true resilience isn't silence. It's not pretending you're okay when you're falling apart. It's standing in the truth of your pain and still reaching toward help, toward rest, toward a life that holds you better. So if no one ever told you before, you are allowed to be supported. You are allowed to need love in your rawest form. You are allowed to stop performing strength and start practicing honesty. You deserve connection that doesn't demand your perfection. You deserve safety that doesn't require you to shrink. You deserve a life where your needs are not shameful, but sacred. And if your healing starts here, in this quiet moment with just you and these words, that's enough. Now, share this with someone who's been holding too much for too long. Leave a comment with one thing you're finally ready to say out loud. And if this made you feel seen, subscribe. This space was made for you, because healing begins with honesty, and honesty begins together. Take a breath. Feel your chest rise, your ribs expand, your body remember it still belongs to you. Across these 8 chapters, we exposed a truth that was never meant to stay hidden. Burnout isn't weakness. It's a system extracting more than it returns. Therapy isn't indulgence, it's healthcare you were priced out of. Rest isn't laziness, it's neurological repair. Silence kept you alive, but connection will let you live. If any part of this resonated, if you saw your own reflection in Marcus's overtime eyes, Maya's sleepless glow, Danielle's unbreakable until broken smile, remember, mental health is not a luxury. It's a birthright, and birthrights are not requested, they're claimed. What claiming looks like. Starting now, 1. Name it. Leave a comment with one word that captures where you are today. Exhausted, hopeful, ready. Saying it out loud breaks the first brick of silence. 2. Reach out. Share this video with one person who pretends they're fine, but whose eyes say otherwise. Healing multiplies when it's witnessed. 3. Keep learning. Watch our video. You were the smart one. Now you're lost. Why? Next, It dives deeper into rebuilding identity after burnout and pairs perfectly with what you've just heard. 4. Stay connected. Subscribe and turn on the bell. This channel isn't a content feed. It's a gathering place for minds that feel too much and still dare to seek clarity. A final reminder: the world may profit from your exhaustion, but it cannot own your restoration. Take your rest without apology. Seek help without shame. Speak your truth, even if your voice trembles, especially then. Because the moment you reclaim your right to heal, you don't just change your own story. You challenge the broken system that told you to stay silent in the first place. And that, friend, is how revolutions begin. One honest breath at a time. Subscribe if you're done surviving and ready to live. Like if this gave you permission to pause. Comment the word that defines your next step. Share with someone who needs to hear, you were never meant to do this alone. Your mind is not a cost center. It's the center of everything. Treat it like it matters, because it does.